Not too long ago, I made this video about Mighty Number 9, and then immediately after that, I felt like ranking all the powers. Number 9. Number 1. With Pyrogen, you can create incredibly powerful close-range explosions. You can make these explosions even more powerful and reach an even bigger area by holding the button down and then releasing it. This is also the only weapon in the game that can be fired while hanging off a ledge. I also have to remark that the damage at some point, after enough charge, gets so high, you will just skip the weakened phase entirely and blow them up on the spot. All well and good until we have to bring up the weaknesses of this weapon. This weapon is not well designed. At all. For starters, the range of the explosion is very small if you don't charge it at all, and charging it to an at least usable point requires some time. It requires a lot of hiding, and that's not very fun. Second, exploding really big and making the enemy not go into a weakened state but die instantly is bad, because enemy weak can be eaten, which provide boost. Another issue with overcharging is that if you really overcharge, you'll be stunned right after the explosion happens. It only lasts a couple of seconds and shouldn't get you into any trouble, but it just feels bad. I would also like to argue that absorbing a red enemy does absolutely nothing to help this power, because it reduces the time it takes to charge by quite a lot, and it increases your damage, which is bad because it makes you even more likely to overkill an enemy, meaning you'll get even fewer boosts. Overall, this is probably the hardest weapon to use for absolutely no reward. You get nothing out of the extra effort you put in. It gets 9th place. Number 8. Number 8. Picking between Counter Shade and the one I've put at number 7 was a very difficult choice, because they're both just kind of pointless. But I figured that Counter Shade was just ever so slightly more pointless because a better version of his weapon exists. Whereas with the number 7 spot, you could argue at least that one's completely unique. Counter Shade equips the player with a long-range bouncing projectile. You can have 2 of these in the air at the same time, and as I've already said, they do bounce. Quite well, actually. And if there's an enemy nearby, whenever they bounce, including off of other enemies, they'll go straight for that enemy. This makes Counter Shade a fairly effective long-range crowd control weapon. You can take out multiple enemies, even ones off-screen, fairly easily, though it might miss 1 or 2 every once in a while. This weapon does run out of ammo every once in a while, though. Shouldn't be that big of a problem, because that ammo comes back to you fairly quickly compared to other weapons, but it is still worth keeping in mind. Finally, a red boost will increase the damage of your shots, and it will make them more likely to target nearby enemies when bouncing, which makes it a fair bit more reliable at crowd control. A good boost overall on an overall pretty good weapon. A good weapon that's in 8th place, because I do really think there's another weapon that does everything this thing does better. But we'll get to that. Number 7. Number 3. I want to emphasize that Dynatron is only not in 8th place because it isn't a side grade to like 3 other weapons. It does something no other weapon does, and that is, well, you can play like a complete coward and focus on dodging. There's really not much more to it than that. But while it isn't a very good gimmick, at least it's something no other weapon can say it does. Dynatron creates 5 little spikes, which travel slowly in a straight line in 5 different directions in front of you. Get close to one of these spikes and you will create an electric beam that goes from your head to the spike, dealing damage to anything the spike is attached to, as well as anything standing between you and the spike. If you have a spike attached to a weakened enemy, you'll be able to absorb them from a distance just by dashing. Which is one of the main reasons I call this a coward weapon. The other 2 reasons being the atrocious damage output and the awful ammo. This is one of the few weapons that will very frequently run out of ammo. This is because not only does a single shot cost more than the amount of ammo you gain back from absorbing a single enemy, but your passive ammo regeneration is also absolutely awful. Absorbing a red enemy will also let these shots go through walls, which leads to really awkward moments where you could swear last time you played this level, this room was a lot more crowded. I'm not entirely sure what a weapon that has you slow walking through most levels has to do with speedrunning, which is what the entire game is built around, but it is factually functional. So 7th place is what it gets. Number 6, number 4, Super Mario numbers. Seismic puts you in what is essentially a forklift, which is extremely unwieldy, has you frequently crashing into things you don't want to crash into, instantly kills most enemies, and it also makes you invincible. Did you catch all that? Also, this power seems to absolutely never skip the weaken phase, unlike Pyrogen. So you will almost always have an opportunity to absorb whatever enemy you defeat. You can also run into a weakened enemy or jump on their heads to launch them, which turns them into a vicious, extremely high damage projectile at the cost of no longer being able to absorb them. Absorbing a red enemy will also make this ability even more ammo efficient. I hadn't brought up ammo yet because this thing never runs out of ammo to begin with. It also makes the forklifts and any and all projectiles it launches way more lethal. But that's also not much of an improvement because it already deals way too much damage. Yeah, this is a pretty phenomenal ability. Really, the only bad thing I have to say about this power is that sometimes you just want a gun. The speed boost can be a little unwieldy at times, and bumping into something or bumping into a wall will send you way back. It's not to say that this ability can't solve almost every problem in the game that a gun can solve too. I'm just saying that sometimes you want something else. This is not a solo viable weapon by any means. Number 5. Number 6. After how positive I was about the number 6, you may be surprised to now realize we are only halfway into the list. Yeah, this whole game only has 3 bad weapons. Everything else is pretty good. I know I said in the past that I put Aviator at number 1, but for all the utility he offers, I do think the middle of the list is a little more reasonable of a place for him. Because yes, he trivializes all of the parkour in this game, but you also have to factor in that other abilities provide a lot of offensive power, which Aviator doesn't have. If Aviator also had a decent amount of offensive power, then yes, he would absolutely be number 1, but as it stands, I think this is a better place for him. Aviator provides Beck with what is essentially an umbrella. It constantly deals damage, and it can protect Beck from anything that a projectile could normally destroy. You can let go of this button to launch a projectile of your own. A shuriken of sorts, which travels in a really odd way and isn't very consistent, and overall, yeah, this is definitely the weakest part of your power. Finally, you can press the button a 3rd time while the shuriken is out to recall the shuriken immediately. The most notable aspect of this weapon is definitely that while you have the umbrella up, you have an increased jump height and reduced gravity, which makes you phenomenally mobile. This also offers Beck the only consistent source of vertical mobility he will get in the whole game. Beck has no double jump or wall jump of any kind, so if you want to get higher than you usually can, this is the only way you've got to do it. The main perk of absorbing a red enemy and then using this weapon is that holding up the umbrella normally consumes small amounts of ammo, but it won't while you have a boost. Although the ammo drain on this weapon is already very lenient, and you shouldn't run out of any ammo anytime soon unless you're actively trying to empty the bar. Very nice weapon overall. Number 4. Number 2. Cryosphere fires up to 3 very powerful arcing projectiles, which also apply a status effect. This status effect deals damage over time and slows enemies, and will eventually freeze them. Frozen enemies are completely immobile, cannot attack, and are easier to get a 100% perfect absorption on. And yes, that does include certain bosses. Hitting an explosive barrel with this weapon also creates a unique interaction where it will only explode after a couple seconds. Absorbing a red enemy will make your shots pierce through multiple enemies, which is an extremely useful addition to a weapon that already deals phenomenal damage enough to one-shot certain enemies. There's really only two things that I think hold this weapon back. The first being the range limit. Arcing shots are useful for hitting enemies below you and not so useful for hitting anything else. The second being that this really just is the default blaster but with less range. Yes, it deals way more damage than the default blaster, but that means for every situation that this thing is going to come in handy more than the default blaster, there's also going to be a situation where the default blaster is just more useful. The default blaster doesn't take up a reselection slot. So, mathematically speaking... Number 3. Number 9. The default blaster is just ever so slightly better. The default blaster fires up to 3 medium damage projectiles, which travel in a straight line and have very decent range. Spam firing it also gives you a pretty decent damage output. Absorbing a red enemy will make your shots more powerful, and it will make them pass through multiple targets, which is a very nice addition on a weapon that travels in a straight line with no gimmicks. As for weaknesses, this weapon really has none. It's really surprising that the default weapon is as good as it is, considering, you know, you unlock 8 other ones as time goes on, but no, it's solid, and it holds up really well even once you've got every single Mighty Number weapon. Really big fan of this one. Number 2. Number 7. Brandish outfits the player with a sword, which deals very high damage up close and can block projectiles. Attacking with your sword does not consume ammo, which makes it unique from other reselections. You also have the ability to charge this attack, which allows you to unleash either a spin by releasing it once fully charged, or a strong downward slash. By charging the attack and then releasing the button normally, you can perform a spin slash, which is surprisingly weak for how much time you need to spend not attacking or defending to even get to use it. The downward slash is used by releasing the button in midair while holding down, and it's a fair bit stronger, though its range leaves a bit to be desired for how situational it is. That was a nice way of me saying they're both completely useless and you shouldn't even bother charging them. Fortunately, this reselection also comes with an extremely spammable, extremely strong sword attack which can deflect bullets and go through shields. Which brings me to why I think this melee weapon is so much better than every other close range weapon the list has seen so far. Consistency. Are bullets coming at you? Just hit them with the sword. Shield enemy? Just hit them through the shield. There's a lot of situations a lot of weapons can't deal with half as easily as this thing can, which is why I also put it above the default blaster. The default blaster has to work around shields, this thing doesn't. Really, the only downside this weapon has is that it is indeed a melee weapon, but as far as melee weapons go, this thing really doesn't have any meaningful downsides. It doesn't have range, but I mean, that tends to be fairly common with swords. Don't get me wrong though, I'm glad this thing at least has one weakness. I think having no weaknesses at all should be reserved for the main weapon. I mean, imagine if you had spam ability, high damage, and you could be used at all ranges. And you dealt with crowds too or something. I mean, that would just completely ruin the game. I'm so glad that does. Number 1. Number 5. Battalion gives you access to a really big bomb. That you tap it once and it sends out the bomb and it sticks to surfaces and enemies. And then you tap it again and then it really makes a really big explosion. you could you could also hold and release if you like that more. I don't have much more to say about it. If you absorb a red enemy, it makes the blast radius even bigger, and it also does a ton of damage. And yeah, this. Okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. Okay, I can talk about this. So Battalion makes extremely powerful explosions at basically any distance he so pleases, which last 2 seconds or something, and their blast radius gets even bigger if you absorb a red enemy. And when I say they last like 2 seconds, I mean they are effective for a solid 2 seconds. As in, anything that enters their range in that time will also be destroyed just as efficiently. I'm genuinely unsure how this is supposed to be on par with something like the Spin Slash on Brandish. Really, you're just shooting buffed Spin Slash Brandishes. That is your projectile, except the range is even bigger. For how much nonsense this game will throw at the player sometimes, I think this game and this weapon deserve each other though. I think they're in a perfect harmony with one another. The completely broken weapon in the kind of broken game. It honestly kind of took me a second to realize just how overpowered this weapon is. Because for this video I revisited all the weapons and I was like, man, a lot of these aren't that bad. Why did I dislike them so much? Then I remembered in my original playthrough, this was one of the first weapons I unlocked. I think the second one. And then it all started to suddenly click into place. Wait a second, the other weapons aren't bad, this one's just objectively better than all of them. This one's just so overpowered, I don't feel like using anything else. Now, don't think every other weapon is useless because this thing exists. For almost every weapon, unless you're Pyrogen I guess, there is a use. Every weapon in this game has a moment, usually a boss fight, where it comes in really handy. Real talk though, if this thing didn't run out of ammo in a handful of boss fights, it would be absolutely solo viable and it would be efficient too. Anyway, this video didn't really have an intro of any kind, so to keep things consistent, it won't have an outro either.